Any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning. Good morning, La. So I hope the sound is all right. Buongiorno. Okay. Grazie. Bonjour. Ben. So in our study of the steps to the Great Perfection, we are presently in the fourth mind training about the Guru, understanding what is the Guru and how to approach the Guru in terms of attitude, and then also serving the Guru in terms of our actions. So kindly generate the intention to apply this for the sake of all sentient beings, wishing that they might attain perfect liberation and omniscience. Yesterday was the sorry, I'm not sure actually. Anyway, I think the other day we were celebrating the anniversary of Jetsun Milarepa. Yeah, that's right. Yes. So it's the day before the full moon on the first month. Yeah, that's right. So Jetsun Milarepa, I think, needs not a whole lot of introduction to most of you. But at the same time, if you've never read the life of Jetsun Milarepa, because in English we do have some translations, I warmly recommend reading it. Really, as an example of a great practitioner, and also just from the point of view of his life being so extraordinary in terms of his dedication, and certainly not entirely free of drama, and then also his example through his dedicated practice, and also his style of teaching, which interestingly actually what we have Milarepa's life and his so-called 100,000 songs, collection of his songs, actually comes from the vision of somebody called the Mad Yogi of Sangnyön Heruka, who envisions received all these. So it's sort of actually like a treasure teaching, but it is something that we sort of unilaterally regard as the authoritative statement about Milarepa's life and his teaching, and really such an extraordinary life and such an extraordinary body of really profound instruction on how to practice the Buddhist path. So that's Jetsun Milarepa. So presently within the fourth mind training, then we are looking at how to serve the Guru in terms of our deeds. So we left off where it says, the state of complete omniscience comes only from an enlightened Guru. Therefore, just like the Bodhisattva Sadaprarudita, who served the noble Dharmagata, like the great master Nagarjuna, who was liberated in a single session due to his great devotion to the Mahabrahman Saraha, like Atisha, who underwent incalculable sufferings on the high seas just to request teachings on bodhicitta from his guru Lingpa, like Naropa, who followed Tilopa, and the exalted Milarepa, who served Mapa, willingly to do whatever your guru commands, enduring hardships just as they did, and offering whatever you have to the guru. So, at the risk of stating the obvious, with enlightenment, we are not approaching this in terms of something that could be learned, that we could understand on the basis of our own intelligence, and then understand the teaching and then get it. That's what a lot of obviously academic approaches like that, but also very often there is the idea from self-help books and a culture of just learning wisdom from books that you could actually get it. Oh yeah, this person says something really, very insightful. I'm going to do that. It doesn't work like that in this case. This is about seeing something that lies beyond the ordinary conceptual mind, and it's about going a place that if we were there, then the path wouldn't be necessary. But right now the path is necessary. There is something we need to learn, and we're not going to learn it from any other way than what we've often said, accumulating merit, purifying obscurations, and receiving the blessing of a qualified teacher. And so the path lies so much in completely gauging the teacher and being completely willing to step outside of our comfort zone and meet the teacher. The teacher does not want us to stay where we are. The teacher knows that although we're enlightened, we do suffer from being stuck in some small patterns. And so the path is intended not to exist for the teacher, or even that we should ultimately be committed to the path, but actually to extract ourselves from samsara altogether and to become like the teacher. And so the intimate the intimate interaction with the teacher is essential. Of course, like I've often said, this could very well be just being anonymous at the back of the row of a large auditorium, but still, there has to be some following and a place where there is some devotion that is just like these gurus here. If they had been relegated to the far back of the auditorium, they would have done so happily and humbly. So there's never been any culture of pushing, or the circumstances might lead to physical proximity. They might not, but that's secondary. What it really is about is this devotion. And so these students here that I mentioned are all exemplary. Not particularly in terms of their proximity. In fact, like Atisha, what is being mentioned here is just his suffering, traveling from India to Indonesia, and so forth. So it's not necessarily just about the physical proximity. So it is really about this being engaged in a living situation, but also one that's very non-aggressive and simply just allowing what happens to emerge, but with that continual attention to the living presence. Doesn't have to be. I'm always quoting my friend Eric Schmidt, who in front of Dilgokun's Rinpoche said, "Rinpoche, I think a lot more about you when you're not there." And the the practice of Guru Yoga is not premised on the actual physical presence of the teacher, but it is very much premised on the presence of the teacher. So it doesn't mean sitting in front of the teacher. It could be that we are off in a retreat cabin or at our work or in the middle of driving, that we think of the teacher. So anyway, this kind of devoted engagement in the recollecting and the invoking the presence of the teacher is so important. If you have, then Jigme Lingpa continues, if you have the wisdom to know how to regard whatever arises with devotion, you will see that the Guru is an expert when it comes to the vital points of the instruction, that he or she has attained the warmth of meditative experience, possesses great blessing and power, and is highly realized. At this present time, in fact, the Guru is Samantabhadra himself, and thus we're very fortunate. Without acting like a startled yak. And so what is it they say? It reflects a Tibetan colloquialism demonstrating a fickle mind. So without being a startled yak, fickle mind person, you should now serve your Guru with the utmost respect. Over and over again, think to yourself, I must do whatever it takes to receive the profound instructions and gain realization equal to my Guru's. When this has taken birth in your being, and the Guru's blessings have infused your being, first the mind will turn away from samsara. Second, it will open up to the expanse of wisdom. Third, realization of the co-emergent will manifest, and you will understand all the conventional phenomena that can be known and be self-liberated from your bonds. Fabricated assumptions about the awareness of absolute wisdom will be severed from within. So on the basis of the devotion to the Guru, we'll be completely uninterested in the comforts and the occupations, the busyness of samsara. It will introduce us to the nature of mind. It will enable us to realize the nature of mind, and we'll be free from whatever appearances that arise, free from being entangled in the dualistic grasping and fixation. Then we'll be free from what ordinarily binds us. And so at that time, there'll be no confusion about the nature of awareness as something that we are either getting to or imagining and so on. There'll be certainty about this nature from our own experience. The approach of serving a guru described above is intended solely for novice practitioners. In the context of the main practice, the offering of practice is the only one of the three forms of pleasing the teacher which you should concern yourself with. So, as persons who are new to the path, it's really important that we approach and serve the Guru as is described above, which are then in terms of making material offerings, and this doesn't in any way have to be of a certain limit. It's rather that we actually do something to the best of our ability. So that is making offerings, and then also serving the Guru as much as we can, being available for the Guru and pleasing the Guru through our actions with the body, speech, and mind. So that's in terms of the doing. But as far as the main practice going, then actually settling into equanimity and pursuing experience and realization, that is what then really matters. And that's for then having gone through the stage of approaching the Guru and attending to the Guru, then the practice is then the supreme way of pleasing the Guru. On this point, the complete condensation of the 8 instructions states, now to please the Guru with a skillful, specific, and extraordinary method is to work toward the attainment of enlightenment, to carry out exactly what the Guru commands, offer your pledge to practice for 1, 6, or 12 months, 1, 6, or 12 years. Similarly, render service to the Guru and work for the welfare of beings in a way that is in harmony with the scriptures, safeguard and ensure the integrity of the 3 forms of the Buddha's teachings. Thus it is said, if you let go of mental resistance to carrying out the command without hesitation, your goals will be attained without hindrance. Again, here it applies that we need to do this according to our circumstances and our capacity. So in a culture where, just like nowadays, it's taken for granted if you're going to be an engineer, you're going to have to set aside 3-4 years to that. If you're going to be a doctor, 7 to 10 years and so forth. So these are just things that you have to do, and there's a culture, there's a framework for it. In our culture, that framework does not exist presently. You're you're sort of struggling within a culture that is not at all intended for this and has very little understanding of it, you're naturally going to have to do this outside of the given parameters. And so without that support of a Buddhist civilization, you're going to have to do this as best you can. And already there you can do plenty which has so much value, which is relinquishing entertainment and focusing on perhaps not doing 12 months of retreat, but maybe 12 hours, maybe setting aside a day, or even just doing one day, or even relinquishing watching TV, and so forth. So these practices of engaging in the path as best we can, since there's not the ideal conditions within our culture, it's so much about just doing what we can do. And the main point really is that we are pursuing then the intention of the teachers in teaching. Yeah. In this way, you should establish a framework by studying the teachings you have received, cut through to their very essence by contemplating, and take them to heart through meditation. So these are the three prajnas. This is how we enable the wisdom that sees through the deception, sees through the confusion of samsara. That is the clarity, the prajna, that is enabled through studying the teachings and making sure that what do the teachings mean in terms of our immediate daily experience. It's so often that a teacher will be talking about working with all the emotions, meaning what's happening within our mind. And at the end, somebody will say, yeah, but how do you actually do this in ordinary life? So it's so important that there's not a single, we have to understand there's not a single of the teachings that are given that are not for ordinary life. But the thing is, we need to listen to what is being said and then look at ourselves and see, where does this apply? I have the teachings here, and here is my experience of the mind, and I received five teachings. These 5 teachings, where do they actually fit in terms of my lived experience? And that's where we're not going to get it spoon-fed, because we're all different. All of us have to, on a very personal level, see where these teachings are intended. We have to know our own mind. So it's not about doing something, saying you do this or you do that. It's about introspectively knowing what's happening in our mind, and the teachings on how to overcome desire, how to overcome jealousy, pride, anger, ignorance, how these are applied to our experience of these 5 styles of neurosis. And so once we understand that, then we can see where the teaching, how it applies, and then we integrate it through meditation. So also important to understand then, when we talk about meditation, that meditation is not something different from our ordinary life. Meditation is where we deal what is happening with ourselves in ordinary life outside of the conceptual. So that's where the meditation is enabling us to experience that which is deep, genuinely present within all our experience of life, where there's not the confusion of our agitation. And so meditation is that place where we can't run away, but where we can actually genuinely settle and not be preoccupied with all this superficial arisings in the mind. So the practice of meditation is then the final aspect of the cultivating prajna, which goes beyond just the ordinary conceptual mind. But to know and understand how this works, so important to get the teachings and to understand how they apply, and then to genuinely integrate them. Jigme Lingpa goes on to say, one must venture forth to the state of a master siddha by coming to a definitive understanding via these 3 forms of knowledge, meaning prajna. Nevertheless, novice practitioners who are unable to actually put this into practice should make it the goal of their aspirations. So we might not have the circumstances for that, but we continually make the aspirations. So often we come across what we think are Buddhist prayers, and I know some of the translators, they say we don't like the word prayer, we say aspiration. And you can kind of understand, because sometimes prayer is kind of something that by the flavor of the word indicates that we're helpless and there's somebody greater who's going to do it for us. Regardless of whether we call it prayer aspiration, there is the notion that presently we have this situation. We want to arrive at somewhere else, and so we set a goal and we aspire to get there. And formulating this in terms of liturgies and aspirations and so on is so valuable. It really clarifies, what is it I'm doing? Where am I heading? How am I going to get there? And so we have continually various aspiration prayers that we find. Like, for example, at the end of our study session here, that's a very brief aspiration. The first lines, they're taken actually from Longchenpa. This is Cortland's 4 lines, his translation of 4 lines of an aspiration by Longchenpa. And the last 3, they are then some other 3 sets of slokas that Longchenpa also wrote, which is then translated by the Nalanda Translation Committee. But these 3 ones, the 3 last they're something that so often is chanted. Gandu chewa chewa tamchidu tori and dundam toparasho. Chema tapu chudam cheju ching. Anyway, shan't pretend to know it entirely, but it is something I've chanted many times, and it's something that often is chanted for that very reason, that is actually setting our goal. Those who are able to practice, Jigme Lingpa continues, those who are able to practice in the correct manner should do so in accordance with the place, time, and circumstances in which they find themselves. So again, according to what we can do. So, this approach is discussed in the Flower Ornament Sutra, the Avatamsaka. We have a big English translation of that. And in the ancient translation schools' ocean-like collection of tantras, such as the complete empowerment of Vajrapani Tantra and the arrangement of the 100,000 Samaya vows, and in all the various uncompiled key instructions. So these are works that would outline the way that we should approach the path. Here, actually, we're blessed in the modern world with some very valuable instructions how to approach the path practically from Chögyam Trungpa, who really knew the modern mind, and also in lots of other instructions that have been given, which are very, very practice-oriented. So as far as pith instructions that are translated into English, we have an abundance. For example, in the Nyingma tradition, we have the light of wisdom teaching, the Lamrim Yeshe Nyingpo. In the Gelug tradition, we have the Lamrim Chenmo, the great the stages of the path. In the Sakya tradition, we have the 3 visions. In the Kagyu tradition, again, Trungpa Rinpoche's, but also classical works such as the Jewel Ornament of Liberation and so forth. So there's a lot of instructions on how to actually practice the path. All of these teach that casting aside that which should be practiced is the root of all problems. All of these teach that casting aside that which should be practiced. All of these teach that casting aside that which should be practiced. Neglecting that which should be practiced. Okay, yes. So that is the root of all problems, and taking up the practice is the source of all good things. Hence, this is held to be the root of the path. So we recognize that we have things, we have actions that we need to do, namely the practice of the teaching, and postponing that or not doing it, that's going to cause a lot of problems. Actually engaging in the practice, that is the source of all good things. It sounds terribly simple, but as we know, very often we tend to end up in confused places where we're not clear on that. But apologies for my poor reading of this, but this is really important. This is the root of the path. Chinli Norpa Rinpoche once said to a friend of mine, do what you want to do, and don't do what you don't want to do. Simple as that, really. If we have the, understand the teaching, then that is the root of the path, yes. See if there's any question. About Longchenpa's aspiration prayer, we said then, where can I find the 7 qualities of a fortunate birth that I mentioned? That's a good one. You know what? I think it actually are the, okay, just tentatively, we'll verify this, but I think it is what we call the 7 riches of the Bodhisattva. And this is also, we'll check that. But I think tentatively this might be valid. Faith, discipline, generosity, having listened to the teaching, and having listened to the teaching. Then we have what's called shame, which is in terms of our actions, in terms of people outside. We have embarrassment, which is thinking decorum in terms of acting with people that what they can observe in us, and then also shame, which is from within us, knowing what's happening within ourselves. And then the final one is prajna. So let's just, as a sort of working formula, I think that's what we're talking about there. Okay, so this is then the end of the section on the serving the Guru, understanding the value of the Guru, understanding how to generate the attitude around the Guru and serving the Guru in terms of our deeds, where the last point then is pursuing the practice. And at the very end here, practicing and abandoning not practicing. Now the 5th mind training, meditation. And again, quoting from the Sanjisechi Giju, the child scripture, if you obtain instructions but do not meditate, you will definitely not attain Buddhahood. Hence, you should abandon laziness and meditate one-pointedly. By serving your teacher as if he or she were as precious as your own eyes, you may receive all kinds of profound and vast instructions. However, if you fail to lay aside distractions and meditate on them one-pointedly, a merely superficial theoretical understanding will not produce a true understanding of the meaning of that which possesses the excellence of all aspects. So when we say possesses the excellence of all aspects, we're talking about then realization of the nature of reality, emptiness. But we talk about emptiness in terms of endowed with all the aspects of enlightenment. So the Avatamsaka Sutra states, just like an expert ferryman who delivers many people, yet who himself dies in that very place, without meditation, such is the Dharma. Likewise, the master Aryadeva explains, those who crossed to the far shore of study for millions of eons, when looking back on their blessings, will see that this does not lead to realization. There's a point in Naropa's life where, I probably have mentioned this a few places, where he one night is visited by a Dakini. She asks him, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, yes, and she becomes so happy and dances around the room. Then she asks, have you realized what the meaning? And he says, oh yes. and she turns into this old hag, which, as it says in the scripture, displays all the qualities of ugliness. And she cries. And he says, "What's the matter?" And she says, "When you said that you understood the meaning, then I was so happy because that's true. You were speaking the truth. But when you say that you have realization, you're lying. You don't have realization." And similarly, also in the life of Vimalamitra, he and his fellow student Jana Sutra, they were walking, and they had a common vision of Vajrasattva. They were out walking near Bodh Gaya, and they had this vision of Vajrasattva. And Vajrasattva said to them, "You too have been born as panditas for 500 lifetimes, yet without reaching realization. If you want realization, go and study with Sri Singha." And and Vimalamitra, he actually did that right away. And eventually also Jana Sutra did that. So learning in itself is not the objective of the path. Similarly, even the sage's own attendant, Ananda, did not progress beyond the level of stream enterer to attain the level of foe destroyer until the time of the first assembly, despite the fact that he had served at the lotus feet of Shakyamuni himself and had crossed over a virtual ocean of teachings. Let's see if we have the story. Yeah. This refers to the three great assemblies that followed in the centuries after the Buddha's death. At the first, the 3 baskets were compiled, with Ananda, due to his great memory, in charge of the sutra basket. It was also that time that he first put all the teachings he had heard into practice. Only later was he made a patriarch of the teaching, having attained the level of arhatship through practice. There's another version of this story, though, which is that when they were having the gathering, the council, the first council, where all the students were then going to tell what they had heard the Buddha say, actually Ananda wasn't even allowed to attain that. And so he sat depressed and dejected outside this gathering and was completely distraught. And I can't remember if somebody told him this or he realized it, but he then decided that he realized that he had to practice. And so, because he had received so much instruction from the Buddha, when he finally actually sat down and then practiced, he entered then the level of the stream enterer. So, or rather, he attained, I think, the foe destroyer. That's right. He became an arhat. So that was due to him finally practicing and then attaining a spiritual level. So at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. Also, if we read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it will say, this, because the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which is intended to be instruction for someone at the time of the death, all it's saying is recognize the nature of your mind. Recognize the nature of your mind. And it says so in many different ways. We shouldn't be confused by the way that it explains it in terms of deity and so on, and the 100 peaceful and wrathful. It is just saying, recognize the nature of your mind. Don't be deceived. And that's where the teaching also says, at that point, somebody who has a vast amount of scriptural learning will be lost if they don't have realization. And somebody who might be a very simple practitioner, having understood this nature of mind, having recognized, even though they don't have much learning, they will then be liberated. So at the end of the day, experience is key. According to the complete empowerment of Vajrapani Tantra, this noble being was in fact an emanation of Vajrapani, referring to Ananda. If that is so, then the assertion that ordinary immature beings like us could attain enlightenment is pure rubbish. There's very often some misunderstanding about, let's say, titles. For example, Magom Sanje in the Poa tradition and also in the Dzogchen tradition and so on. There's works that actually are called Buddhahood without meditation. But that means the nature of the practice is such that it is abiding in the condition free from conceptual construction, which of course has nothing to do with anything artificial. So yes, it's abiding in the natural state. So we can say, oh yeah, that's not meditation. That's just abiding without fabrication of any kind. So it's a complement to the highest kind of meditation to say that it is not meditation. So when it says Buddhahood without meditation, it means actually Buddhahood through that kind of meditation. In the Mahamudra tradition, we talk about the 4 levels of Mahamudra. What is it again? One-pointedness, free from construction, single flavor, and then non-meditation. So that's the highest kind of meditation. So when people get that wrong, they might think, oh yeah, the highest teaching, Mahamudra and Dzogchen, that's something that where you don't need to meditate, is obviously a bit misunderstood. And also just ordinary persons who like ourselves, certainly like myself, who just gets caught up in unnecessary superficial concerns and also just neglects meditating. So that's where, if we look at some of the sublime beings, seeing how much they practice, then obviously, then it goes without saying that ordinary persons need to practice. We definitely need to practice. So, therefore, to awaken the profound wisdom that has been present in your mind from the very beginning, you need to be guided along the profound path of symbol, meaning, and sign by a fully qualified enlightened teacher. And after that, you must train without letting yourself be distracted. So I wouldn't have minded if there was a footnote in here about what they are: symbol, meaning, and sign. No. I'm trying to figure where one could look for these, and what the Tibetan is. Anyway, I can probably find it somewhere. I'll look into it. But yeah. Anyway, what we are, however, speaking about is really just being guided along the profound path. And whatever instructions we have received from great masters, we should consider that these are complete. If you now come across these terms here, symbol, meaning, and sign, don't think that it's something other than what you have already received. So we're not lacking in any way. So the point really is that once we have received these instructions, that we then train in these without letting yourself get distracted. Think to yourself, I won't fall prey to laziness and sloth for even a moment. I won't procrastinate concerning myself with food, future plans, hopes, and fears. I won't let myself get lost in a state of apathy. So we shouldn't think that there's something else that needs to be gathered in terms of instruction. But what we should think is really, gosh, and we should look at how we fall prey to these circumstances here. What really is the object of our concern when we hear this is we should look into how we do procrastinate ourselves, how we are preoccupied with food, future plans, and things that we hope and fear. So that's where we then, as Jigme Lingpa says, properly restrain your mind with these thoughts. And like the focus of a mother searching for her lost only son, don't get sidetracked by the concerns of this life for even a moment. Trample laziness underfoot. Now, a mother who's lost her only child, and I would say in the Tibetan it would be pu, and pu is actually generic, could be lost son or daughter, but that, apart from that, then the implication is a mother who's lost her child, all sorts of things can go on, but she doesn't really care that much until the child has been found. So Jigme Lingpa says, devour procrastination and conquer sloth, and stay in isolated places like a wounded animal or a rhinoceros with a heartfelt thought. I must practice these instructions that I have heard. So again, here, not having possibly the circumstances, again, this could mean renouncing TV. It could mean renouncing unnecessary conversation. It could be renouncing unnecessary, getting involved in unnecessary projects, thinking that we need to build a house or thinking that we need to do something, change circumstances in our life, which very often takes so much time and might not necessarily be ultimately that valuable. So in that way, remaining focused on what is really, really important, like a mother searching for her only child. Okay. Maybe you explained before, but can you clarify how the Dzogchen teachings are connected with Buddha Shakyamuni? Dzogchen teachings are the very heart of all the teachings that we have in all of Buddhism. So we of course refer to Dzogchen teachings as a class of teachings. At the same time, this is really the very nature of realization. So it lies implicitly within all the various teachings that come down from Buddha. It's really just a word, but it actually just means the heart, the intention of all the various teachings that we find in all the Buddha's words. And so also particularly from the Dzogchen perspective, there's never a time where we don't actually see all the various aspects of the Buddhist teaching as expressions of this spontaneous perfection. We see that Dzogchen is implicit in even the most ordinary little teaching that we have in Buddhism. Negativity, the sixth mind training. From the child's scripture, it says, "Ponder the fact that worldly wealth is like honey made with poison. The extent to which one enjoys it is the extent to which one engenders suffering." So this is also where we, for example, in the Chetsu Nyingtik, it says, the joys of this world are short-lived, and they ultimately lead to suffering, just like some very beautiful fruits. We could eat them, but then they might even taste sweet, but the moment that we digest them, they can be the cause of us dying. I remember my brother when he was a kid, he managed to eat something where, to my mother's horror, she found out he had just, stuffed down all these yellow berries. This was in Denmark, and they got him to the hospital, and he survived. But that happens. So that's the notion of the approach to the worldly wealth. The way of the Bodhisattva states, though we think we want to be rid of suffering, suffering is exactly what we rush straight toward. And though we want to be happy, in our ignorance, we destroy our own happiness like an enemy. So this so often we have in the teaching also, we would say, although sentient beings, they wish to be happiness, they create the causes of their own suffering. In fact, in their ignorance, sentient beings think that some of these causes of suffering are causes of happiness. For example, engaging in negative actions of aggression or actions of greed and so forth. It might be done with the intention that this will make us happy. And in fact, all it does is make us more, suffer more. So in that way, we are destroying our own happiness, just like we would destroy the happiness of an enemy. So this is, of course, again, where in the context of the teaching, we have to apply this humility. We have to be willing to see how we are confused. Jigme Lingpa says, we're completely ignorant when it comes to knowing right from wrong. Though we want to be happy, what we do brings only suffering. An example of this is a moth that is attracted to the light of a butter lamp, but ends up dying, scorched in its flame. Or a bee that craves nectar and suckles a flower only to become stuck or killed as the flower closes up. Or a deer killed while entranced by the sound of a flute. The hunters, I gather, in the old India and in Tibet would summon deer with playing the flute. Then when the deer came by, then they would shoot it. Or a fish drawn by the taste of the bait on the tip of a fisherman's hook, dying on dry land. Or an elephant that gets stuck and dies on the muddy shores of a lake, having longed for the cool sensation of its waters. The treasury of Doha states, see them to be like a fish or a moth, an elephant, bee or deer. Thus the afflictions lie dormant, hidden in our mind streams like salt dissolved in water. Someone with a chronic illness may appear to be fine when the illness is in remission. But when he or she eats something or encounters some circumstances that reactivates it, the illness will manifest once again. In a similar manner, our attachment and fixation toward the 5 desirable sense objects creates a karmic link with the 3 lower realms, prompting us to engage solely in the negative actions that will cause us to be redrawn there. It is only fitting, then, that we will eventually have to experience the suffering that results from this non-virtue, despite our wishes to the contrary. To rid ourselves of this suffering, we need to abandon negativity once and for all, for it is this negativity that is the cause and source of suffering. Nevertheless, taking medicine to alleviate symptomatic pain will not suffice to cure the disease. The illness's causes, conditions, essence, temperature, and so on must be precisely identified. So people say there's a lot to study in Buddhism, but the thing is, what we're studying is entirely relevant to what we experience at all times. What can get in the way is sometimes language, and so we might not appreciate the way that it's phrased. For example, talking about suffering when we'd rather be hearing about good news. We'd rather be hearing about something that makes us feel, warm and blissed out. But the Buddha says, here Jigme Lingpa is saying, there's suffering. But this suffering, again, is not something that's just choicelessly there. We can deal with it. So when we have an illness, of course, we all want to be free of illness, but when we have an illness, we need to deal with it. And so that's where understanding what it is exactly that causes the illness is so important. So we do study the Dharma in terms of to understand the nature of the confused consciousness, how it's driven, where it is that we consolidate these patterns of confusion, and what can be done about them, showing how these are workable, how they are removable. But the more that we look into the nature of the teaching, the more we can see they're complex and they're workable. They're not like one solid thing that we can't overcome. They're made up of many different causes and conditions, and so we can identify the nature of these phenomena as really just illusions and workable conditions. Only then, when we're actually addressing the cause rather than just the symptom, only then may a medical treatment be properly administered. Just so, what we need to recognize here is the negative act or non-virtue that precipitates our suffering. The treasury of higher Dharma explains further. Virtue and non-virtue, in all their forms, the path of karma is taught to be tenfold. So we talk about the various 10 actions that need to be embraced and the 10 actions that need to be abandoned. So non-virtue can be summarized under 10 categories. Now, when we look at these, it's important that we understand the nature of karma and the nature of karma in terms of its the effect of an action being contingent on, yes, causes, but also conditions. So in the Buddhist teaching, we always understand the complexity of this. So while we do have rules or guidance on what really constitutes virtue and non-virtue, we should really understand that it has so much to do with our attitude when we do it, the way that we execute a particular action, and also the attitude after we've done something. So this is just to say that when we talk about these 10, it's not as if that we're not falling into this trap that we sometimes have in ethics and prescriptivist ethics, where we talk about, okay, that's right, that's wrong. Here we're just giving a general picture of what really is helpful and not helpful. So we talk about these 10 categories, the 3 physical non-virtues, which are taking life, stealing, and 3 sexual misconduct. The 4 verbal non-virtues, which are 4 lying, 5 divisive speech, 6 harsh words, and 7 idle chatter. And finally, the 3 mental non-virtues, which are covetousness, malice, and wrong view. So these 10 are 3 physical, 4 verbal, and again 3 mental. So taking life, the first then, generally speaking, it goes without saying that killing any sentient being, regardless of the species, constitutes the non-virtue of taking life. The taking of life is subdivided into 3 categories: the intent to kill, the act of killing, and the culmination of the act. If all 3 of these are present, all forms of the non-virtue of taking life are complete, and the karmic ripening will be extremely weighty. The intent to kill is the occurrence of a murderous desire. The act of killing may involve a deluded mindset, yet no murderous intent, such as when you step on a being and it dies. Hence, the number of sentient beings that we have killed is beyond reckoning. Furthermore, it won't suffice to experience a single result of this non-virtue, as each act has a fully ripened result, a result that resembles its cause, and a dominant result. An example by the 5 acts of immediate, as exemplified by the 5 acts of immediate retribution, such as killing one's mother, father, Vajramaster, or a foe destroyer. The fully ripened result of taking life will be a rebirth in one of the 3 lower realms, depending upon the intensity of the act. As the result that resembles its cause, even if one manages to attain a pleasurable existence, one will have a short life. As the dominant cause, the food, drink, and medicine one ingests will have no potency. So again, there's these 3 ways that an act ripens, and that is the fully ripened result, the result that resembles its cause, and a dominant result. So the fully ripened result is then what happens as a result of something that can lead to, a negative action leads to a negative result. Then a result that resembles its cause, for example, killing, is then that we might be, we might suffer then having some reasonable condition, but then again, there's still the presence of this negativity within our life. And then dominant result is then something that affects all aspects of our experience. So this will also be illustrated, I think, in the following. So that's as far as taking life goes. Then stealing. The basis for stealing is a valuable item, such as gold, that you do not own such as gold that you do not own and is in possession of another, meaning it's basically somebody else's. Such object may be taken by force, deceit, or stealth. The first occurs when someone is violently robbed or when something is taken as punishment. The second refers to extracting a hefty interest when doing business or to miscalculating in your own favor. Sort of, how do you call it? Double accounting. Taking by stealth refers to either outright theft or various deceitful means, such as saying, I really don't need that thing you have, but I don't have one. So, yes, in order to acquire the desired item, ultimate resulting in the notion that you have achieved your aims. The fully ripened result of stealing is the same as stated in the previous section, that will be impoverished. The result that resembles its cause, meaning that we did something sort of in duplicitous way based on actually a mentality of poverty, that experience of poverty that is the cause that stays with us. So even though we might have, we will continually experience this absence, this poverty. So that's the poverty that initially drives us. And then the dominant result is that one's crops and fruit will dwindle. So this is then a sort of a manifest way that this permeates our experience. Sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct includes relations with someone who is upholding a vow of celibacy, someone who is in a committed relationship with someone else, or a relative. In this day and age, it can be difficult to determine who one's relatives are, so the Vinaya stipulates that anyone to whom you are related up to 7 generations back is a relative. Beyond that, they are not relatives. Thus, sexual relations with relatives up to 7 generations back are to be abandoned. Furthermore, although your sexual partner may be your wife or some other legitimate partner, having intercourse in front of a religious object, in the mouth or anus, and so forth are not permitted, nor is having intercourse at an appropriate time, such as during pregnancy and while holding the one-day precepts. Okay, to just preempt some of the questions that might come, I would like to say that I have heard lamas, and I'm thinking of actually Kala Rinpoche in one work. He says this is also very culturally conditioned. So there might be certain cultural practices that are different from the present context. I'll just put that in there. With sexual misconduct, one first conceives of such an act, and then prompted by an emotional affliction, desire, right? One applies oneself to the execution of the unchaste act that one desires. The act is complete when the genitals unite. The fully ripened result of sexual conduct is a rebirth in one of the 3 lower realms. The result that resembles is cause is that one will have a promiscuous spouse, significant other. As a dominant result, one will be born in filthy swamps and terrifying places. And I think also elsewhere it says in places where it rains a lot. Okay, well, on that note, then we'll leave it. We've completed then the first 3, those that have to do with physical misconduct. I have ants in my kitchen. I feel bad about killing them. I usually chant Om Mani Padme Hum. Yeah, try and see if there are ways. I remember one of my teacher, Tugama Wangyal, we spent 3 days dismantling. We spent 3 days dismantling a whole roof so that we could take out these wasps that had settled between the ceiling of one floor and the floor of another. Do as much as we can. By the way, what you can do, what I have done successfully, because ants are actually quite sturdy, is to actually sweep them into a dustpan. And when they're all in the dustpan, before they sort of crawl out of the dustpan, you shake it. And then actually they fall down in the bottom of the dustpan. And you just shake it a little bit, and then you put them outside. You keep them inside the dustpan by shaking it. Sorry, this is making the whole video shake. But you do that, and just try to get them out. I know I have also where I'm living, we have ants. We have to find out where they're coming from and what can be done. Of course, we can chant mantra, and we should chant mantra, and you could even dissolve Dutsi, um, medicine, this sacred medicine in water and spray it over the animals and so forth. But the main thing is really that we try as much as we can. That's the best we can do. Is considered stealing is it considered stealing download Dharma books? Well, you know that in that case, I'm very much guilty of that, and I would say rather to take a positive take on it is then if you do download Dharma books, then just think through the merit of studying and practice this teaching. May those who, may the publishers and so forth have benefit. The use of essential oils on ants' parts is also a good repellent. Yes, somebody was just saying neem oil apparently is good, and there are various alternative. Yeah, so find out where the ants come in, and then perhaps prevent them from entering. Okay, so thank you very much for joining, and shall see you next time. Through this virtue may all beings throughout existence awaken together without a single being left behind, in the pure realm of the luminous essence, the ground of the great perfection. May they remain inseparable from the kayas and wisdoms. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together.